Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Brendan Carr from the Mount Sinai Health System, and it's really a pleasure today to have this amazing panel talk with us about this concept of Healthspan. I want to say just a couple words, and then I promise I will hand it off to the content experts. But mostly, I want to start by saying it is a rare thing to put together an electrical engineer, a stem cell researcher, a neurosurgeon, and a primary care doctor, right? That's a funny slurry of people to talk about this concept. And I want to level set and just say that this concept it's a buzzword that has gotten to be, in certain circles, a frequent topic of conversation. When we talk about Healthspan, we're really talking about a pivot for us. We're a traditional academic medical center. So it's a pivot for us to go away from thinking about a disease state and managing of a disease state to thinking about how you improve, yes, lifespan and certainly quality of life, but that you think about that across the entire continuum of your life. We don't think this is just about longevity. We think that this is about making sure that we optimize you at every step of your life. And I want some of that to come out today, because the other special thing for us is that we know how to discover the future of healthcare delivery. It's what we've always done at academic medical centers. We have world-class scientists, right? And then we have people that are delivering clinical care every day. We're bound to listen to the data that comes from the experiments that we do and to then translate that into something that you can trust. And it's the reason, and we're very proud, it's the reason that people do trust us, do trust academic medical centers, healthcare systems, and certainly, we feel like it's a very special bond that Mount Sinai has with the communities that we serve. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how I get scientists that are tethered to the rigor and must do it exactly the right way to partner with people that are at the point end of the spear, that are faced with a patient who says, yeah, the right way. I want it now, right? That's an important tension, and we're going to talk about that. So I guess the last thing that I want to make sure, the last framing piece that I want to say is that we think in terms of what we know works, right? It's covered by insurance. We know that it works. It's mainstream. We think about category number 2, which is it might be the future. It might be. There's some signal. We're interested. People are doing it. We need to figure out whether or not it works. Or maybe scientists think they could get to a place where they could get it production ready. And then this other side of the coin where we think it doesn't work or we think it's harmful, and we feel like we have a responsibility to say that this isn't real and this isn't the future and this isn't where you should go. It would be amazing if those 3 domains, standard of care, we know that it works, we're not sure yet, and this isn't the right thing to do, if it were clear. The bad news is it's not, right? It is gray, and that is our challenge to unpack some of this. So I'm gonna start picking on some folks here, and again, I'm gonna one more time say electrical engineer, stem cell researcher, neurosurgeon, primary care doctor. Some of them are at the point end of the spear. Some of them hide. Some of them spend their time in the.
I wish I could hide
in the laboratory. So that is far too much of me talking. I'm going to launch into it. You're going to watch the magic that we do when we argue about things to find the truth together. I'm going to ask Sarah if you would start off and just we need like the very simple for emergency physicians explanation of stem cell science and where we are with that.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. So I think we heard a little bit of bias there in terms of hiding in the laboratory.
Never lived that down.
I would say that we scientists think that we are at the cutting edge of the spear, in fact, and that we're the ones that are, at least among those who are pushing forward the boundaries of healthcare into the future. So just to say a few words about stem cells and how they're relevant to aging. So first of all, as you age, your stem cells age too. Your stem cells are the fountain of youth, really, for your body while you're still healthy. So they're essential to maintain and regenerate many of your tissues. So as they age, these stem cells start to gradually lose that capacity. And so that you can see things like that are very obvious, like your skin becoming thinner and drier, your hair becoming thinner or becoming lost, your muscles atrophying. These are all due to the failure of stem cells to continue to work properly. So one of the things that we do as stem cell biologists is to try and understand what happens during aging to the stem cells, because by understanding that, we can design interventions to keep those stem cells healthy and vigorous and active as long as possible throughout your life. But there are actually many other aspects to stem cell biology and stem cell medicine. One of these is that we now have the capacity to make any tissue in your body or any cell type in your body from cells that we harvest from your skin or your blood. So we can take just a blood draw and we can transform those cells into a stem cell that can make any kind of tissue. So as you can imagine, that has enormous possibilities for the future of healthcare. It means we can make pancreatic beta cells that will produce insulin. That can cure type 1 diabetes. There was recently an article in the New York Times about that. That's just one example. So as people age, we are able to make tissues and cells for them to replace aging tissues and cells. This is, really at the forefront, at the spear point of what we're able to do, and we're really working towards that as a major goal. One other thing that we can do, we hear a lot about personalized medicine, and we'll hear some of that from primary care and other people on the panel. This is another thing that's becoming more and more clear, that we can tailor how we treat people depending on their genetics, which tells us a lot about what diseases they'll be susceptible to. And even beyond that, we can take cells from patients, we can derive stem cells, and then we can ask, if a patient has a particular set of gene mutations, is this actually going to cause a disease? Because right now, we just have correlations with the clinical data. So we can really learn a lot about people's biology from their stem cells. And then we can take these tissues and cells that we've derived, and we can do drug screening to pick the drug that will work best for that patient. This is already being done very well for cancer patients, but it will be coming for many other types of diseases as well. So there are really a lot of different aspects in stem cell research and in regenerative medicine that will pave the way in the future for treatments that we're already really starting to be developed.
So some of the themes I'll pick on there, so we talk over the last couple of decades, we've talked a lot about genetics. And now you're hearing a different lens on this, which is, genetics are important, but the next piece out, and how they get expressed is really important. The one thing she did not say, which I would like her to say, is that we get a free pass. You have no responsibility. She will just regenerate whatever breaks down over time. But she refuses to say that, which is why I'm then going to bridge to a guy who I am confident is wearing at least 5 to 7 six self-monitoring devices today, and who I saw in the gym for 2.5 hours after his run, and who runs a giant portfolio for us that puts now your behavior at the center. It's not just your genome. It's not just the stem cells. You have a little bit of skin in this game. You have some responsibility. Want to talk about your life?
Yeah, I mean, actually, mentioning the aspects of of course, genetics plays a role, but we've overestimated the role it plays. I mean, today, if you think about the connection between genetics and health, maybe it accounts, anywhere between maybe maximum 20%, maybe as low as 5% or so. So we have other factors that are incredibly important. We know about them from cardiovascular disease, where we know lifestyle behaviors are important, diet, exercise, we know blood pressure, etc. But we also started to appreciate the aspect of the exposome, the aspect of the environment that is really affecting, how we live and what's going to happen to us.
Exposome, exposures.
Exactly.
Just like genome, is your genes.
So I'm wearing a silicone band. It costs maybe about $2. It's chemically treated, so it can capture all the chemicals that I am exposed to right now. It's analyzed in the lab. It's not a test that you can do today. It's done in a laboratory. But eventually that test you'll wear it for a while, you'll give it to the lab, send it in an envelope, and you get the result, what kind of chemical exposures that you have been faced, and maybe find ways to try to avoid them. So this is one way. And as you said, I'm an electrical engineer. What we do as electrical engineers, we build devices, we build things, but we also equip the device or the thing with sensors so we can monitor their health. Before this machine breaks, I have an early signal of what's happening to that engine or what's happening to that plane that I built or this car, and I correct for it. And we need to take that concept to human beings so we're able to continuously monitor their health, continuously monitor the environment that they have, and make these corrections before you get these chronic diseases. And that's really this whole aspect of what is Healthspan is all about.
Yeah, so let me add one more piece there, which is the amount of data that comes in and what we do with it, right? So I don't have 6 devices on, but I'm wearing an Apple Watch, and my phone's paying attention to what's happening, and I'm careful about thinking about my closing my rings and my activity and my food intake, and people are probably using different apps of different sorts. The challenge has been, and I'll leave this with you, and then we'll jump somewhere else. The challenge has been that there's so much information, but there's not a whole lot of knowledge. And we're not talking about artificial intelligence here necessarily right now, but it's embedded in the way that we think, and in the way that we think the future is we're going to deliver care in the future, because it's going to be able to sift through all the information and serve it up in a way that is actionable. And I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you asked me that question about a year ago, before the upcoming of generative AI and multimodal aspect of dealing with data, I will tell you, yes, it's a difficult problem. We may be able to tease it out in modules. Right now, we really have the way to take this very complex data that comes at different scales. So there's different frequencies, different measurement, et cetera, billions of data points that can be ingested into a model, and that model becomes now your AI doctor, or not only one doctor, you have billions of doctors. You're able to do in silico simulation of your health. The computer will do this for you. You have your medical records. You have all your sensor data. You have all your knowledge about your health. And the computer is going to do all these simulation about optimizing your health and give you these simple recommendations in the morning. Sleep 1 extra hour today. Take more steps or exercise in this fashion. Do this mental health exercises to optimize your cognitive function. And then modify a little bit your diet. And it's a daily thing. It's precise to you also.
Yeah, and maybe make an appointment, because we're seeing that you said the machine is breaking down. The machine is breaking down, right? And sitting next to him is a woman who makes the machines unbreak down, right? So the idea that it's starting to say to you, there's some signal, we're getting worried. You should be talking to people that have the capacity to think about regeneration. But so let's pass it down to Brian. So Brian, I'm going to guess that when you went through training, you were mostly in the business of fixing the machines after they broke down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How'd you get to the way you think about the world now?
So for the last...
a little bit of bio, too. Yeah.
For the last 25 years, I've been a neurosurgeon. I've been focused in a field called neuromodulation. Essentially, what I do is I put brain pacemakers into people to treat things like Parkinson's and OCD and depression. So I'm familiar with the idea of being on that sort of emerging cutting edge. And we've been very successful. But I did see, as years went on, kind of 2 groups of patients. One, patients that they did well, but they still were sort of struggling with the diseases of aging that we all struggle with. And we improved their quality of life, but they're still struggling. And then there was a smaller subset that were running triathlons, Parkinson's patients running triathlons. And so as somebody who's a neurosurgeon, I've thought to myself, well, what's different about that population? What can we do? And, when I thought about what we do for these patients, these brain pacemakers harness this concept of neuroplasticity. This is the ability of all of our brains to grow and to adapt to the environment. And it just so happens that the diseases of aging have in common with neuroplasticity 3 very fundamental things. You have problems with inflammation, you have problems with your mitochondria, and you have problems with your insulin signaling regulation. And the thought occurred to me that the fact that these two things coalesce, and from this concept of engineering, that if you have a complex system, which is our bodies, our health, and there are three critical areas where things all intersect, there gives us a huge opportunity to make small changes that can make broad changes into our health. And so for me, that's where I got really interested in this idea of Healthspan medicine, in order to bring to my patients this ability to essentially live better lives.
Yeah, we have some time. Double click on that. What does that look like? Someone comes to you and says, I want to.
Right. So patients come to me, and very often, I don't typically see patients that are very, very infirm. They do have comorbidities like diabetes and hypertension, things of that nature, but they're truly engaged in their lives. They want to, as they get older, they don't want to just retire and go to some vacation. They want to be engaged. They want to continue to grow, to learn. We all do, to the very end of our lives. And so when they come to me, we do a diagnostic workup that involves labs and other diagnostic criteria. And this is what's leveraging the academic environment, that I live with scientists, and we can really bring the very cutting edge of that diagnostics to a particular patient. And then we create a sort of 360 educational and interventional program, so that patients can collaborate on their own health and move into a better place as they get older.
But it's coaching. They get a lot of information, you build a program, and then there's a feedback loop.
Right, absolutely. It's constant measuring and interacting with patients and availing themselves as new information comes along, that we can adjust things. As you said, sometimes things are in the emerging space. Well, it looks promising, but it may turn out that it's not good. We can adjust things accordingly in real time.
All right. So for the last century, we have been leaning on primary care doctors to do everything from take all the information inside of Zahi, Sarah, and Brian's brains, bring it into a 6-minute interface with their patients at the same time that they bend the cost curve and reduce the overall spend on healthcare in the United States. So.
No problem.
I figure. So what better than to sort of end with Sanjai, where we ask him to explain what it's like at the pointy end of the spear, what patients expect from you, and especially if you maybe overshare a little bit. We're in a safe place with friends about the disconnect between what we know the future is on the scientific side and what's really ready for prime time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I've been seeing patients in New York City for almost 25 years, and many of these patients, all walks of life, all in New York City, from the most vulnerable to the well-to-do. And every single patient has a different level of motivation, a different level of engagement, a different level of trust, a different level of literacy, health literacy. And for many, many years, one after the next, tens of thousands of patients I've seen, I've had to quickly assess and then hopefully longitudinally assess where they fit in each of those buckets. Because as much as I love everything that my scientific colleagues up here has presented and talked about, absolutely love it, a lot of people aren't that engaged. How do we get them more engaged? How do we get them to trust our advice? How are we the sort of, the moral compass, as well as the arbiter of good information, because there's so much misinformation out there. So let me give you some examples. Now that we've come to 2025, and there are so many wonderful wearables, and there's so much data both on the internet and now being generated by AI, there's a slew of questions and commentary and complaints that come from my patients about, why aren't I having this test? Shouldn't I take this supplement? Shouldn't I take this medication? So I think that with all the data input that comes in, the way to individualize it best is first to understand, okay, well, let's look at all of your current history. Let's look at what your traditional blood tests have shown. Let's see if there's other inputs that we can gather, but let's separate the noise from the signal. And there's often a lot of noise and less signal. But I also need to understand, what can we do to meet your goals? What are your goals? Your agenda may be different than mine, And I'd love to align these things. But first, let me see, if you just want to talk about your chronic pain and not your hypertension, your diabetes, and these other diseases that, down the line are really going to reduce your health span, then that's fine. I need to address what you want to address today. But that makes it super challenging in 6 or 10 minutes to do. And so now that we have a lot more asynchronous care, especially since COVID and since the ability to have better channels of communication that aren't just at the visits, that's opened up a lot of communication and a lot of sort of access points for patients that can be useful. But one thing that I have noticed, especially with certain wearables, be it the Oura Ring or the Apple Watch, is that it can generate a lot of anxiety. Patients necessarily get notifications about things that for which they don't really have any symptoms, but they're concerned now that, my heart rate's this slow, even though I was just working out for 30 minutes with no symptoms. Or my sleep is being disrupted, but I feel totally fine. What do I do with this information? If it creates anxiety in a way that leads to some maladaptive behavior or just worry, then it's still going to be my job to work with the patient to figure out what can we do with this information. At the end of the day, I look at all of the data that's coming in as a test. And as primary care physicians, as all physicians, we want to say, I want to do a test, I want to have an input if it's going to change my management of you, if it's going to make you healthier, and if it's going to change maybe some of your lifestyle choices. If those two things aren't met, then what are we doing? We're collecting all this data, maybe we're at a cost, maybe we're creating emotional distress, and what have we solved for? And so while I'm very, very happy and positive about all of the enormous advances that are coming from everyone on this stage, as the sort of person at the bedside and on the front line, I need to consume it carefully. I need to help the patients consume it carefully. And I also need to engage the patient and make sure that they and I meet at a place where we can say, okay, which kinds of tests are going to be useful here? Let's not just bite off more than we can chew. Let's figure out what works from all of our traditional, history taking and data that we have in the chart, and let's look at what inputs might make more sense. If you're not walking at all, why are we, trying to, figure out how we're going to get you to 150 minutes of exercise a week? Let's first start with small steps. And I often tell patients, forget about yesterday. No regrets. Let's just talk about today. Let's see where you're at. Everybody's valuable. Everyone's got a lot of self-worth. I want to tap into that. I want to be your coach. And I want to help you make small steps, because when we hit small goals, we're happy and we keep going forward. But if I ask you to reach for the moon, people often get frustrated. So those are a couple of thoughts.
Yeah. So we went from patient-centered care, right? And shared decision making to the language that's getting used now in DC is medical freedom. And medical freedom resonates deeply with me, right? It's my body, and I should be able to make my decisions. The angle, the lens that we have as an academic medical center is that we should make sure that there is a voice of truth that is embedded in the data points that you're using to make decisions, right? And so, I think that's consistent. I guess I'll maybe on the bookends here, I'm an emergency physician. When people bring me 6 months in a spiral bound notebook of all their blood pressure measurements, and say, well, here you go, I think, I don't know what to do with that. The world is changing as the data is being synthesized and served up. So you add the ability to synthesize data, you add the important, and Sanjai talked about this, the importance of really articulating what your priorities are, and then you add best-in-class science that is underlying it. And we think that is sort of the special sauce that happens when a full-thickness academic medical center like Mount Sinai can be a part of this. But I want to poke them now because they fight about this. In that gray zone, right? In that gray zone of things that may work, right? You heard Sanjai say, what are we doing? If we're causing distress, we're collecting data, and it's not really changing care. I would say, it's not changing care yet, but that data is the foundation upon which we might discover something that will change care, and maybe it was worth the emotional distress or the inconvenience. Which leads me right to the trigger words, which is trial of one or N of one. And so this means different things to different people. And I think we should just take a minute to unpack it. We all know what a giant clinical trial is that defines, the truth. What's a trial of one? And who wants to go first? It's one of the two guys. You guys, whoever jumps in gets to go.
All right. So
yeah, there you go.
Brian. Yeah.
Okay, so In scientific medicine, there are kind of two ways that we can glean whether a therapy is helpful for us, okay? The classic way is hypothesis-driven, double-blinded, randomized controlled trials where you have a group that is matched to another group. One group gets the intervention, the other group gets a placebo or some sort of control, and we follow you out for a period of time and we see if the intervention makes a difference. And that's the gold standard. It's been the cornerstone of science forever. And it's extremely important, obviously. Problem is that we're an annoyingly long-lived species, right? And so when you're talking about interventions that are increasing health span and the fact that we all live different lives, it's really, really hard to create the sort of constrained environment to run that double-blind study for a lot of these things that are emerging to help us with health span. So what's an alternative that one could potentially leverage? This concept of N of 1. Every single patient can be their own trial and control. And the idea being is that in an environment like an academic medical center, we can leverage all of these granular emerging tools to measure as we intervene on a patient. And then you combine that with things like machine learning and AI to sort of interpret that massive data pool. You can actually learn a lot from an individual patient. And if you aggregate over time, you can begin to create things that are more generalizable.
But Sarah,
There's also something in between. I mean, the aspect of using biomarkers, LDL, for example, your cholesterol, is a marker of your cardiovascular disease. And I want to point this because it's very important. We're getting into a space where measuring things, if you follow the traditional method, will take a long time. You do an intervention on a person, you want to see if this is efficacious, we're not looking at 30, 40-year trials. So we could introduce biomarkers that are going to say, if you change these things, which mean that, yes, this is going to have a health span effect. I want to give credit to the X Prize, the Health Span X Prize. We actually competed for it. We tap myself on the back, and we are one of the finalists to this $111 million prize. Thank you.
amen.
We're still not there. This is step number one. It's baby step. The
But
reason
if we
why
all vote today for us,
the reason why I want to mention the X Prize is because they spent a lot of time to try to define what would be the biomarkers that you need to utilize and have an effect on to show that you really have something successful. So they identified things related to cognitive function, things related to muscle function, and things related to the immune function. So if you're able to touch on these, we know that this is going to have an effect on the lung. So this is when we are talking, I wanted to introduce this because we are going to all come up with new interventions. This is in the space of running trials to see. But of course, Brian is correct, and I want to hear also what Sarah's opinion is, because she's different. When you are now managing a person...
rigorous. We call it rigorous. Yeah.
When you are now managing a person like Brian is doing, you really have to be individual. He is looking at you, at N of 1, and the recommendation that you need to make are specific to you. They're not part of a population study. So that's really where we have the tension a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification, because those proxies, we get the right biomarkers, the right proxies that allows us to measure and to know whether or not the intervention is working, at least in the short term.
So Sarah.
But Sarah, isn't an N of 1 just an anecdote?
So
I learned there is evidence-based medicine, right? The evidence, eminence, the old guy says this is how we do it, and then anecdote-based medicine.
So yeah, I mean, there's a few things I could say about this. I mean, I have no issues with what we're doing in terms of much more accurate measurements on individual patients and following how those affect biomarkers. I think that's really important and exciting. And as I mentioned, although the influence of genetics, your genetics are not a prediction of what's going to happen to you, but they are a readout of your susceptibility. And that susceptibility can be modified by these lifestyle interventions. That is what I think of as personalized medicine, that a lot of us have got our genome sequenced already, but we don't really know what it means. right? So a lot of the work that's going on at Mount Sinai is to figure that out. What does that mean? What does that mean for each of you? And how can we educate doctors, once we understand what it means, to tell their patients, what are the things we should track for you? These kind of measurements of biomarkers are very, very important. What we don't know yet is whether those biomarkers that we're all aiming for will actually extend your health span and your life. We don't know. So there's no harm in doing this, so I've certainly got no objection to it. But we don't know. You may do everything right. You may have the perfect markers, and all of a sudden you get glioblastoma or liver cancer or something. And it doesn't matter how much you exercised or how beautiful your diet was, you're still, not going to have the lifespan that you wanted or the health span you wanted. So there's a lot. The human body is extremely complicated, and as try as we will, we can't predict everything. We can just do our best. Where I get worried about the N of 1 is not with these interventions, which are relatively, I would say, harmless. Doing more exercise and modifying your diet, great. We should all do this. Where I worry is when somebody comes to me and they say, my friend Johnny went to Panama and had stem cells injected into his knee, and he got better. So how come you won't, inject my ankle with stem cells because, Johnny says it will work? So what I try to explain there is, well, Johnny was an N of 1, right? If you'd had 100 Johnnies, 2 of them might have developed irreversible knee problems from this therapy because it was never rigorously tested in a trial. So that's the danger. And that, I think a lot of you are aware there are many, many, clinics out there offering all sorts of magic with stem cell therapies. Most of these are untested. Many of them are dangerous. The stem cells may be contaminated with bacteria or viruses. They may harbor mutations that are cancerous. So it's extremely important that people understand the difference between going to an academic medical center where they're going to receive therapies that have been rigorously tested and going to some cowboy outfit that is going to inject them with things that could be harmful. And not only that, could dissuade them from getting the correct care that could actually help their condition.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The rigor fans in the so let's go there, because there's a couple sessions that are about this signal to noise question. How do you know, right? I'm a consumer and I would like to, I would like my left knee to hurt less. I'd like to be less stiff when I get out of bed. I'd like to be sharper. I'd like to, all the things. Can I ask the two sort of folks on the end?
Sure.
The clinical side. Sanjay, this is your thing. Right?
Yeah, it's my thing. I think, I've been, subconsciously doing N of 1 trials all the time when I test certain medications that have a lot of evidence in a certain class. So, what do I focus on? The number 1 killer, cardiovascular disease, right, or cardiometabolic disease. So if I'm using a medication that's evidence-based, that's worked in populations on a patient to bring down their blood pressure, bring down their cholesterol, I have metrics. Yes, they take some time to, display themselves. And then I have the patient who's telling me whether or not they're responding to this medication, if they're having side effects. And then we change certain medications because we have to, because the patient's not tolerating them or it's not effective. And so where an N of 1 trial is being done, in a very sort of routine fashion where you're changing meds and testing in the same patient how they're responding, now we have genomics that can actually help us say we're using SSRIs for depression. And there's many meds for depression and anxiety in particular classes. And many patients are like, I've tried that. Wouldn't it be wonderful for me to know up front with simple tests to say, your susceptibility to these medications is higher or lower, therefore I won't waste our time on this, class of meds. So I think there's a beautiful application there where there's, it's generally, low cost, harmless, and probably efficacious pragmatically. Where I think the problems arise that Sarah pointed out beautifully is people are always coming in saying, this worked for my friend, this worked for my mother, will it work for me? So then we have a thoughtful discussion about it, but it doesn't mean that it's got to end up in a way where we're, loggerheads, where the patient's like, you're not helping me, you're not listening to me. Again, it comes back to the trust. If you believe how I'm informing you, even with, and I will tell you where there's ambiguity, and that's the best I can do. We make it, I recommend you decide, but I want to try and give you the best information possible.
Brian, I don't know if you want to chip in on things that are not proven but that might work, and how you sift signal noise.
Yeah, Sarah brings up a really good point. If you're interested in intervening in that middle ground of emerging therapy, it's the key is risk management. And most people think of the hallmark of neurosurgery as technical expertise, unless I ruin a good story here, but like the real thing is risk management. That is the essence of neurosurgery. And so the idea being is really understanding what the safety profile of these emergent therapies first.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is a reasonable and body of data that sort of says that this is at least safe, then we can begin to sort of roll these out in a collaborative and sort of environment with our patients, because they're eager for this. They're eager to try these things, to try to improve their health span as we get older. And so again, it's just a question of having that very, you talk about trust, that's a collaboration. And it's really, really important if you're going to intervene in this regard.
So I want to leave 10 minutes for questions, which means we have 5 minutes to take on the elephant in the room, or one of them, which is we have a deep commitment to deliver equitable care, and the communities that we serve are widely variable. They are people without very much at all, and people with more than most of us can imagine. Most of what you've heard them talk about today, that partnership that you have with your patients, that N of 1 trial, we can't scale that, right? Which just means that what we're talking about is creating different tiers of care for people that can, in some way, afford to have us spend a whole lot of time customizing something to them, and other people where we can deliver the standard that is paid for by the traditional reimbursement mechanisms. This troubles us. We spend a lot of time thinking about this. We believe we're going to get to a place where we're going to use technology to help to democratize this, right? And you've seen this, right? The awareness that exists just in the general population now about what you eat, and how you live your life, whether or not you exercise and keep moving a little bit, the feedback loops that we're creating. It's not everywhere, but it has shifted. It's not just of the very small percentage of folks that are aware. It is really Maslow's hierarchy is real, and if you have unstable housing, you don't have food, you're not focused on health span. But as you get some stability and some knowledge about nutrition and exercise and managing your foundational, what do you call them, the big 9?
The life essential 8?
Life essential 8.
Life essential 8,
yes,
sorry, I got it wrong. I'm an emergency doctor.
That's okay.
It could be 9, by the way.
Yeah, it could be 9.
They haven't added stress to it yet.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So once you get into a place where you're thinking about that, right, how do we start to think about a future where we're not just separating further the haves and the have-nots? And one of the things, by the way, that I love about Aspen is that we're willing to talk about both of these topics. The cutting edge that not everybody can have or is even hungry for right now, but also what our responsibility is to make sure that we can deliver as much healthcare, health span to everyone.
It's really, we've seen this in many other industries. Initial cost of doing something is very expensive. When Tesla was building the first car, it was a very expensive car, and now you have different models that are cheaper thing. Sequencing the whole genome cost billions of dollars before. Now you can sequence your whole genome for less than $1,000. We're going to probably go back. So I think most of the tests that we are using today, yes, they are expensive. Yes, they cannot be scaled, but eventually the cost of doing that procedure will go down naturally. And the other aspect is that the number of data points that we need to collect. Right now, I'm collecting in the digital twin study over 1 billion data points. Do I need the billion? I don't think so. It's the same thing with optimizing human performance for athletes. Initially, you do a test, and at the end, they're just optimizing few things, few variables. So I really hope that as we learn We're actually the only industry that does not understand its gold standard, which is health. We need to learn what is health, what is the normative, and then eventually we're going to be modifying through variable, which will cost a little. We use AI to scale it because we cannot have multiple Sanjais, trying to do this N of 1. There will be a phone or an app that's going to have multiple AI agents. There will be, millions of Sanjais that will communicate with him, do all the easy work. Same thing as, health insurance does today, right? They don't have people writing letters. They have an AI agent do this. So this is going to converge, and that's my optimism in terms of technology. Yeah.
Good. Other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think, many people have an iPhone, even if they're not well off. And so, that's already tracking their health data. I do think, though, that our health system as it stands is geared towards rewarding procedures rather than maintaining health. And I think that underlying economic model is not one that really helps us to keep everybody healthy. And so that's something I think we all really need to think about.
I would say one thing, if any of these test inputs can really help motivate a patient to become a little more engaged in their lifestyle and to talk to me, hopefully not a million me's, then that's a step in the right direction. And hopefully the payers and the powers that be see the value of that, then can scale it in a way that it's available to everyone.
May I say something about engagement, because it's coming up quite a bit?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to learn from social media. I mean, they really got us into this with the phone. We're so connected to it. TikTok, is optimizing clicks. I mean, there are ways to gamify the brain and get that reward. I mean, that dopamine, et cetera. There are a lot of things being now integrated in digital health to be able to get them into the positive aspect of gamification. We're not selling you ads. We actually want you to be engaged, so you're responsive to the things that we are giving you recommendations.
I think Fitbits, watches, and smartphones did a lot for steps.
Yeah.
And I'm watching the Oura Ring amongst
Yeah.
my peers
Yeah.
decimate the alcohol industry.
Yeah.
Right, and they say,
true.
I drink, I don't sleep. Oh my God, I can't do this
Yeah.
anymore. Okay,
Mocktails.
so we have some time for some mocktails. That's perfect. I love it. Let's start over here, if that's okay. Blue shirt, hat, microphone is almost to you.
Thank you. So we heard about stem cells. We heard about the brain. What about the second brain that we have, the microbiome?
Yes. Sure.
It's not impacted just by what we eat.
Yeah.
It's how we sleep.
Yeah.
Jet lag will impact it. Indications of chronic disease. If you have a leaky gut, you're going to, doesn't matter how much you're going to walk. So what's your view on that in terms of...
I'll start with this because, we didn't go too much deeply here. When we talk about collecting data we are talking about the whole spectrum. That's why I am talking about 1 billion data points.
You should talk about the digital twin.
So exactly, digital twin is collecting data related to the oral and to the gut microbiome. So now, we know it's important, but the problem I have a little bit, all of us in the community of microbiome, there's a lot of diversity. We still don't understand which one are the one important and which one we need to optimize. There will be a role to the gut axis connection that we know for sure. It's not the only one. There's things in our blood, proteins, there are epigenetic modification, there are lipidomics and metabolome. All these are being measured today, and more these tests are getting cheaper and cheaper. We're seeing also a consolidation in the industry, especially there are a lot of venture people here, they know this. There are a lot of companies now pushing the aspect of omics, proteomic, et cetera. So these tests, they not only will be available in academic centers, but they will, in the future, start to become available like in Quest Diagnostic, et cetera. Yeah.
So
the gut is important, yes.
Yeah, it's probably not the answer you wanted, but what I think what it shows you is that it's deeply in that gray zone, and until that information is accumulated, until the analytics are done to start to show the associations about what's meaningful, and then how we can impact what's meaningful. This is why we spend our time worried about interventions that are promising you that we know that inner space already, and they're now going to transform it. What else? You're matching our panelists, so I had to call
Yes.
him.
You should invite him next time.
Yeah, you want to take the seat up here?
Thank you. The five of you all know so much. Sanjay, you mentioned coaching. What have you all learned about listening?
A lot.
Sorry, next question?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
It's obviously
that you-
incredibly important.
I think that's a wonderful question. I'm not a physician, so I don't have to listen to patients.
I will.
But Sanjay and
Yeah,
But,
I will give you.
Somebody let the doctors who never listen
Yeah,
talk.
since I've gotten older, been married for a long time, have children, and certainly have benefited from lots of exposure to patients and lots of their stories, I have gotten better at listening. I think that there's always this tension, right, of the amount of time we have in an appointment, but I try to take every opportunity I have, both during the appointments and even in between appointments, to follow up on questions we didn't get to because I was listening so long, going down a particular narrative. But yeah, I mean, time is the most valuable resource, and so there's no question. And to my earlier points about understanding someone's really what's going to give them quality of life. It may be different than what I think, but if I'm not listening and we're just going like this, all the tests in the world aren't going to achieve anything, because I don't need to be pedantic. I need to be the coach, but I also need to meet them where they're at. And so while all of us would love that ideal of being the perfect listener, I'm certainly not perfect at it, but I've gotten better over time.
Can I just ask, I'm curious what it means. I mean, we were talking about empowering patient, creating precision, finding out their values, and then adding data to that so that we can help them to arrive where they wanted to go. Is there, I guess I'm curious, what did we miss on the listening side? It felt like there was something very specific. I think he needs a microphone back if somebody doesn't mind. I'm curious what we missed, because that to me feels like we're taking big steps from the paternalistic healthcare.
Maybe.
Do the people that you're speaking to have the experience?
I can repeat for you. Do the people that you're speaking to have the experience?
The people you're speaking to have the experience that they've actually been heard.
Do the people that you're speaking to have the experience
Yeah.
that they've actually
So-
been heard, is what he
So
said.
what I was going to try and say, although I'm not a physician, I'm a leader at Mount Sinai, and I think that, as in many professions, listening to people, really listening to them, and what are they saying beyond their words, is the most important thing that you can do. And I'm sure that's the same for my clinical colleagues.
But while we prep for the next question, I'll show of hands again. There's this woman right here. But then I guess I'll just say that I don't think we have arrived at what precision medicine is until we're listening. And, we just can't, we'll never get there.
Hi, thank you. This is a wonderful panel. I think it's the best panel I've listened to since I'm here.
Oh, thank you.
Really great. You talk
I'm
about
glad I called on you.
We planted her.
Oh, really?
You
Thanks,
talk about
Mel.
democratizing medicine. Well, I live in New York City, and several of my doctors don't even take insurance. How can you ever democratize medicine when I can go to a great doctor and my woman who works for me goes to a clinic at
Well,
Mount Sinai or one of the hospitals, Weill Cornell?
I'm glad you threw somebody else in there too. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a massive question, a little bit outside of, I think, the Healthspan topic, and but one that I promise you, spend many, many sleepless nights focused on thinking about and worrying about. These guys know way more about Healthspan than I do. I'm like an actual, healthcare payment and policy wonk, and I'm going to get a cup of coffee with you after this, if that's okay. Everyone is welcome to join. It's a massive problem. It is baked in the foundational expectation that we can have as much health care delivery as we want without
Being paid for.
appropriately covering it. And so we accept this difference in almost every aspect of our life. I bet you stay in nice hotels, and the woman who works for you probably stays in less nice hotels, and your vacations are different than hers in restaurants, and I could keep going. Why we think that health is going to be different in America, where we are structured that way, I could go off a deep tangent, but instead I'm going to call out the guy in the front row who said, "Call on me next."
Thank you very kindly. Engaging panel. Thank you all for being up here and talking about, what is an emerging, sometimes controversial topic.
Yeah.
So I'm the CEO of a clinical stage drug development company, and we use functional metabolomics extensively in our clinical trials. And we have several longevity assets in our pipeline. And so I'm curious, we collect a lot of data we don't really know what to do with. We're looking for patterns and biomarkers that maybe one day will be useful. I'm just interested in kind of your perspective on how systems biology, specifically, systems biology closer to the phenotype, like functional metabolomics. Right. How do you see that really kind of helping us develop, maybe pushing back against the fact that right now it's very difficult to scale N of 1 studies, but, through systems biology, is there a pathway toward developing better predictive value with these N of 1 studies? So we don't necessarily do N of 1. We will with kind of proof of concept, but we have smaller, clinical trial cohorts, certainly. And we're just starting to scratch the surface of identifying kind of unique patient responders, through phenotypical biomarkers that we find. So just interested in your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a strong believer, as I said, as an electrical engineer, I look for biomarkers, to diagnose a circuit board. So this human body is doing all kind of things that we are not monitoring. We go to the doctor, once a year. There's 364 days in the year, and their body is. So a lot of things in our blood, for example, including omic signals like metabolomic, lipidomics, proteomics, epigenetic, etc. All these are extremely important in your case as you're developing specific targets, and they are hopefully being modified, and you want to use them as a surrogate marker. So we totally believe in it. Right now, we don't know exactly which ones. That's why again, going back to the XPRIZE Healthspan, the group defined certain markers that you need to hit. Are they the only ones in the future that we're going to be targeting? Probably not. There will be others. But you have to start somewhere. So the more we learn about metabolomics and you intervene on it because you have something with mechanistic that does it, it will be great. So we're all under the same quest here. Yeah.
As I bring us to a close, and I'm sorry that I have to do that, I'll just say that our goal, our hope here was to really sort of walk you through not just the field, but also the way that we need to approach the field. We would all love to have the perfect answer today. We can't have the perfect answer today unless we build the right architecture so that we're asking questions in the orderly way that we know works, so that we can have the right answer tomorrow. Join my friend and I for coffee at the back if you're interested afterwards. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you.
Good job.